Whether you've just started supporting Tottenham, you've been following the club for a few seasons, or you've spent decades riding the emotional roller coaster that comes with being a Spurs fan, chances are you've come across one of the many podcasts dedicated to the club. They're where supporters celebrate victories, vent after defeats, debate tactics, debate transfers, and try to make sense of everything happening at Tottenham Hotspur. And there's a lot of it. But with so many shows out there, it can be difficult to know where to start. What's the difference between fan-led podcasts and journalist-led podcasts? Which shows focus on tactics? Which are the best for match reactions? And why have the podcasts become such an important part of supporting Spurs in the first place? In this episode, I'm going to explore the entire world of Tottenham Hotspur podcasting. I'll look at how the scene developed, break down some of the biggest and most influential shows, explain the different styles of content available, and help new listeners find the podcasts that suit them best. So whether you're a lifelong season ticket holder, an overseas supporter looking for a stronger connection to the club, or simply someone searching for their first Tottenham podcast, this episode will give you everything you need to know. I'm Ian, this is Poddenham Podspur, and this is your complete guide to Tottenham Hotspur podcasts. So what is a Tottenham Hotspur podcast and what does it entail? I'm defining a podcast for this episode as any show which is distributed for listening over the internet. In practice, we have audio-only shows available across platforms like Spotify or Apple Music, Listen Notes, etc., and video shows available on sites like YouTube. There's no clean line dividing these types of content beyond the fact that YouTube videos can include visuals, can vary much more in length, content creators often post more frequently, and also have the option of going live before, during, and after Spurs games. Now, there's going to be a lot of jargon in this episode that I'm going to use, and I feel like it's a good idea to get this out early. So this is going to be repetitive of things you've heard before for some fans, but there are going to be some people who are listening to this and thinking, oh, that's what that means. And I'm hoping this is just to get us all on the level playing field. So skip ahead if you've heard all this before. It's basically going to be a lightning round of key Spurs podcast terms and acronyms that I think you need to know. So pods, this is short for podcasts. See also podding, which is the act of making a podcast. Fan channels, any show made by a Spurs fan, technically includes podcasts, but usually refers exclusively to YouTube shows. Live streams, podcasts, usually YouTube videos which are broadcast live. Watch-alongs, these are shows where fans watch live games and commentate in real time for other people to watch. They don't stream the game themselves because that's very, very illegal. Match previews. These are shows where the hosts talk about an upcoming match. Match reactions, where people have watched a match and then recorded themselves reacting to said match. Call-in shows. Live streams which have a method for listeners to call in and speak to the hosts. ITK. This is an acronym for In the Know. These are fans who market themselves as having inside knowledge of the club and share leaks online, usually via Twitter. Names that you might hear include Paul O'Keefe and recently SCY or CZ on X/Twitter. Now, for real beginners, there's also going to be some terms here which I'm going to just go over. So again, to help you out, you can find these online. And honestly, this could be an episode all in and of itself in terms of Spurs fan culture and slang and jargon. First up, a really easy one, COYS, stands for Come On You Spurs. N17, the London postcode in which Tottenham, the area, resides. 1882, the year Tottenham Hotspur was founded. Spursy and Dr. Tottenham, these are derisory terms used to describe misfortunes that sometimes affect Tottenham. Sometimes used by Spurs fans as a sort of self-deprecating or gallows humour, always used by rival supporters to insult us. The Y word, YID, I won't use it personally. First used as a slur directed at Spurs fans by rival, comes out of hate speech directed at Jewish people. It became a unifying chant by Spurs supporters to reclaim the word. It's still hurled at us, particularly by Chelsea, West Ham and Arsenal fans, but others too. Still used by many Spurs fans. It's controversial. Its usage is opposed by the club itself. And with this term, your mileage may vary, but expect to hear it every now and then. Some names that you're going to have to get used to hearing in this episode or other podcasts you might listen to and explore. First up is Alasdair Gold. He's a journalist for Football.London. He's a Spurs fan. He's also the host of Talking Tottenham and his own YouTube channel. Tottenham fans love him. Jack Pitt-Brooke and Jay Harris. These are also journalists for The Athletic, and they are speakers and co-hosts on The View from the Lane. They are not Spurs fans. Flav Bateman, Spurs fan, host of The Fighting Cock. Windy, aka Chris Miller, host of The Extra Inch. Nathan A. Clark, another host on The Extra Inch and a popular fan analyst. Ricky Sachs, host of Last Word on Spurs. Chris Cowlin, host of Spurs Chat and a popular online figure who shares matchday footage. Billy T, a frequent contributor on many podcasts and shows and a leading figure in the Change for Tottenham supporter movement. You've probably seen one of his memes or tweets online. Change for Tottenham, a fan group advocating for improvements in how Spurs are run, especially for the owners, ENIC, to sell the club. ENIC, an investment company who bought Tottenham in 2001 from Alan Sugar. Key figures include the billionaire Joe Lewis, or the owner, as well as his children who are currently basically running the club, including Vivian Lewis. A key component of the ENIC ownership structure for many, many years until recently was Daniel Levy. He was the longtime chairman of Spurs and a frequent target of supporter ire. He was accused of being a tough negotiator to the point of a fault and more focused on business than football. He oversaw both improvements in the club's footballing and financial standing. He was sacked in 2025. Vinay Venkatesham, he's the current CEO of Spurs and a former Arsenal executive. More on Arsenal later. And Johan Lange, current director of football and a target of ridicule due to a series of bad transfers and embarrassing statements. I think these are kind of the names and terms and things that you're going to need to know to understand Spurs podcasting. So you already follow the club on social media, or you consume their Instagram content, you get the video sent to you, whatever. How do Spurs podcasts differ from official club media? Well, most fan podcasts, and there's something in the region of about 100 podcasts and channels. I need to update my list, but that's where it was at last year. Are made for fans, by fans. And along with that comes very high highs and very low lows. So you're going to have to basically figure out what works for you. Tottenham used to run its own shows like Inside Spurs and Off the Shelf, but those have kind of gone quiet in the last season or so. Maybe because of our fortunes last season. Some fan content creators have worked directly with Spurs on various productions, including Flav Bateman of The Fighting Cock, Theo Delaney of The Spurs Show, and several fan channels and content creators have been invited on pre-season tours, such as Chris Cowlin and a guy known as Expressions Oozing. There's another breed of podcasts which are fronted by journalists, such as The View from the Lane or The Tottenham Way. These kind of sit in the middle ground between independence and remaining respectful of Spurs as both a source of income for themselves via access and attention, as well as their own journalistic professional standards. Fans can get into the weeds, engage pretty heavily with rumour and conjecture, whereas I tend to find that journalists only want to put things out there that they can verify. Basically, purely fan-led podcasts can be the Wild West. Opinions, production quality, consistency all vary wildly between shows. Now, for these reasons, you might think, well, why do supporters listen? Well, people do this for a variety of reasons. I find the number one reason is entertainment, and I think a lot of podcasters know this. They lean into their big personalities for their listeners' enjoyment, and there's a real connection that you need to make with the person who's speaking to you. If you're more reserved, you might not enjoy somebody who is much more outlandish, or maybe you do. I don't know the type of person you are. Some people are very funny, whereas others are very open to letting their emotions overcome them on their streams or shows. Other reasons I've heard people talk about is surrogate or even real community. These podcasts allow people to connect with other Spurs fans, even if they're on a desert island. And some even have dedicated Discord servers or forums for their listeners to chat amongst themselves, and sometimes even with the hosts. And lastly, I think people listen to just learn something. Podcasters tend to be the most engaged of our fan base and can act like a news source for both real and ITK info. See, that's where the ITK jargon came in. What type of Spurs podcasts are available? Well, many. Off the top of my head, we have tactics, history, humor, call-in shows, live streams, watch-alongs, match previews, match reactions, child-friendly shows, news, pods about Spurs women, and more. Hell, whatever, you're listening to a Spurs podcast about Spurs podcasts. There is a lot. There's pretty much something for everyone. So the Tottenham community itself, I don't really want to give an overview of the club, just some very basic stuff for new fans. If you're listening to this, you probably already have a pretty good idea about what Tottenham Hotspur Football Club is, and I almost feel a little embarrassed talking about it. If you're interested in learning a lot more than the contemporary history of Spurs, I recommend that you go to the Spurs Show's Oral History of Tottenham Hotspur to learn more. They're currently on season 2 of that show, and it traces our roots all the way back to 1882. Our key rivalries include Arsenal, Chelsea, and West Ham. If you're a new fan, you might be confused about who hates us and why, because it seems like it's a lot. You'll pick it up as you go along. But briefly, Arsenal play in red, moved from South London to our area of North London in the earlier 20th century. Spurs fans hate Arsenal and hate the colour red for the most part, especially if it's on a Spurs shirt. Chelsea are another London team who hate us. They had a strong hooligan element in the late 20th century, see the aforementioned Y word, and have been involved in pretty scummy business practices from the turn of the millennium. I've heard people say that Tottenham fans hate Arsenal because they're Tottenham, and they hate Chelsea because they're human beings. West Ham also hate us, and I'm not quite sure why, other than the fact we're also in London. There's a bit of a big brother, little brother situation there. You get used to the vitriol. Now, speaking of history, let's go over a little bit of the history of Spurs podcasts. This can be covered elsewhere, and in fact, I recommend you go back to some of my interviews with key Tottenham Hotspur podcasters like Mike Lee of The Spurs Show or Flav Bateman of The Fighting Cock to learn more. But in short, there were early fan-created shows, and the first ones popped up around 2005, including Cock on Ball, which has since stopped recording, and The Spurs Show, which I've mentioned a few times now, and is currently enjoying its 20th season. It had a huge impact on the Spurs podcasting landscape. These podcasts evolved out of a passionate supporter community who were already used to creating fanzines and rallying together in the 1980s and 1990s. Thanks to easy access to the internet, followed by easy access to decent quality microphones and eventually cameras, this meant that more and more Spurs fans from a diverse range of communities and not just North London could add their voice to the global discussion about Tottenham. In the real world, these shows have built communities, as I mentioned before, advocated for fan action, they've supported ex-players, also known as legends, appeared on national radio and television, and more. In the earliest days of the podcasting situation, access to a recording studio was really helpful and a major asset to the Spurs Show via its then host, Phil Cornwell, who was a famous comedian. But as podcasts began to take off globally, not just in the Spurs sense, and production techniques became more accessible, people began bringing microphones to pubs, homes, shops, etc. to record together. But with improving bandwidth, Skype and video chats and other recording programs, all accelerated by the COVID pandemic, podcasts began moving more remotely. Over the years, many standards have improved, driven by better, cheaper microphones, better automated recording platforms, podcaster skill, both developed and acquired by paid producers, and money. All of this is underwritten by money and a little bit of degree of infamy. Yes, some Spurs podcasts do make money via sponsorship, YouTube or Spotify, for example, ad revenue, Patreons, more on that in a minute, merch and lots of other stuff. And this can all be put back into productions, including music, editing, studios, graphics, and sometimes guests. And as that floor raises, other people want to meet it, right? So as podcasts generally get better, people don't want to get left behind in terms of how they're approaching things. You might find as well that there are different podcasting approaches. Some people will have a running order, so they'll be very organized shows. Others are a lot more loosey-goosey, free-form. They get in and they just say whatever comes into the head, especially in a live stream or a call-in show. So I've mentioned a few podcasts so far, but these are kind of the major ones. I'm going to focus mostly on podcasts themselves, the audio platforms, but I will talk about a few video shows. So The Fighting Cock I've already mentioned. This is hosted by Flav Bateman and has a rotating cast of regulars. It's very fan-focused and leans heavily into their engaging and often funny personalities. It has had a huge influence on the podcasting landscape and has also birthed many different memes which are spread across the fan base. You might have heard the "Could we" meme that came up a few years ago. Basically, could Spurs win the league? That started on The Fighting Cock. It's also been linked to or started many other shows, including The Extra Inch, Raw the Roost, Filthy Shambles, and The Big John Bass Show. Some of these things happened in parallel, others were sequential. I don't think Flav would like to say that he was responsible for these other shows, but he definitely had a hand in helping raise their profile. Some of which they were already highly visible, but in terms of a podcasting platform, their audience is likely to be males aged 15 to 50, honestly. So take from that what you will. Flav also hosts The Lab, which is much more journalistic. Flav has a journalism degree, and it takes an in-depth look at various different topics. It's very cool. I like it a lot. The Extra Inch is hosted by Chris, aka Windy Miller, Nathan A. Clark, and Antonio Bardi, aka Bardi. They focus on tactics. Very enjoyable show. The Spurs Show is the longest running Tottenham pod, as I mentioned earlier, hosted by Mike Lee and Theo Delaney. Often attracts big name guests. They also have interviews with ex-players, meaning that they often platform the club's history. Last Word on Spurs is a very popular show hosted by Ricky Sachs. It has a panel format. Sometimes I find that the guests are unfamiliar with each other, and this can lead to friction. But it frequently attracts popular podcasters, celebrities, and ex-players, and it's billed as an exhaustive discussion and debate about all things Spurs. Frequently includes audio clips from interviews, etc., from the club. The View from the Lane is I think the most popular Spurs journalist podcast. It's run by The Athletic. The journalists include Jack Pitt-Brooke, James Moore, and Jay Harris, plus others. Its regular host is Danny Kelly, but Kate Mason is currently occupying that role while Danny is recovering from a serious illness. Expressions Oozing is a very popular YouTuber who focuses on over-the-top reactions and live streams. Then you have Alasdair Gold. He's a widely loved reporter for Football.London, has his own YouTube channel, and presents Talking Tottenham. A lot of people like listening to Ali because of his passion for Spurs, his inside knowledge, his commitment to not platforming any rumours without investigating them himself, and also he's a bit of a movie buff. And where can you find these podcasts? Well, you might think you can just go to any podcast app or website and just listen to a show, but that's not always the case. Some audio-only podcasts show up exclusively on Spotify or Apple Music, or vice versa for some reason. So you might have to search in multiple places. Probably just a Google search is your best bet. Some YouTube shows will be exclusively shown on YouTube, while others will have an audio-only version for you to listen to in the car, available via, for example, Spotify. There are various tools and apps available to convert a YouTube video into an audio podcast, for you to listen to via your platform of choice, and I'll let you investigate that. I use it for some of the YouTube-only shows. Now, speaking of YouTube, you might find yourself watching a live pre-match show. I'll talk about these, things in a minute. But suddenly, the host will begin talking about how they're going to move to another site to actually commentate in live real time. They'll go to somewhere like Big Up. Now, not only is Big Up a popular jargon phrase that Spurs YouTube say to give kudos to people, but it's also a watch-along site used by several channels, including Spurred On. A few content creators and podcasters also have Patreon channels, where people can pay to subscribe to them and have access to exclusive content like special podcasts, early access, blogs, videos, and community groups on platforms like Discord. And in terms of finding podcasts, although I've mentioned a few shows, and you can probably guess which ones I enjoy more, I recommend that you go to the Spurs subreddit r/COYS and search their archive for conversations about people's favorite podcasts. They're likely to be more honest and in some cases brutal than I will be here. How does a match week shape the content produced? Well, you've got pre-match episodes. So in the run-up to a Spurs versus Chelsea game, for example, people will talk about who's injured, the last game, what the importance of the fixture is, the history of the fixture itself, and any other news that's bubbled up. Post-match reactions tend to focus on what you just saw in a game. Sometimes they're recorded immediately after the final whistle. Other times they'll come a day or two later. Sometimes you'll find that podcasters and fan channels put out multiple episodes a week. And in between games, you'll also sometimes find a midweek analysis, which will be a little bit more high level, a little bit less reactionary than you would get in a post-match reaction. There are transfer window specials where people focus on things that are happening in the transfer window, which we currently find ourselves in summer 2026. They'll also cover international breaks, so they'll talk about England games or Spurs players who've represented their countries. Now, you might expect that Tottenham podcasters will only talk about Tottenham, but you'd be wrong. Current events crop up, bawdy humour is frequent, clean humour too, I should be clear about that. Movie recommendations, Hometown Glory, a podcast, has an entire segment dedicated to culture. Football, economics, if someone can talk about it, Spurs podcasters will talk about it, and your mileage may vary on this. So what's a recommended listening path? Well, for newcomers, in terms of match reaction shows, I recommend you listen to Rule the Roost or watch Rule the Roost. It's my favorite reaction, not a reaction channel, but reaction podcast, reaction episode. It's usually streamed almost immediately after the final whistle on YouTube. For fan discussions, I like The Game is About Glory. It has a regular cast of guests, and they're all very knowledgeable and quite sensible about Spurs. For tactical analysis, The Extra Inch is the daddy in this space, but Ben Bowman and Lily White Lab are also popular options. The View from the Lane is a very good journalist-led podcast. I enjoy their patter and also their insight into Spurs. And for special interviews and historical episodes, I recommend Oso Spurs or The Spurs Show. So let's wrap this up. I don't want to make this go on for too long, although I probably could go for hours. Why do Tottenham podcasts matter? Well, they give us a shared experience of supporting Spurs, and usually, hopefully, a diverse range of opinions for us to integrate into our own worldview as it, comes to Tottenham. And as part of that, there is an education of newer supporters. As I've talked about, there's a lot of jargon and history and a complex Gordian knot of themes and culture around Tottenham Hotspur. And what I really like about Spurs Pods is how it gives people an in to beginning to learn and beginning to recognize phrases. It can also be therapy for long-time supporters who have been through this and can hear other people express their frustrations. Sometimes for some people that's too much, but for others it's very enjoyable. I'm a little bit of a sicko and I kind of like it. It keeps global fans and even fans who are remote to Tottenham, the area, in England, connected to the club. I talked earlier about being on a desert island, but there are some people around the world who are the only Tottenham fan that they know. They found the club through TV or a famous player or a World Cup or something. They connected, it clicked, and they just want to consume and enjoy as much as they can. And podcasts are a great way to do that at your own pace. Podcasts also play a major role in modern football culture. It used to be just the boots on the ground in the stands, watching a game, singing songs, but it's so much more than that. Obviously, social media has a huge part to play, but podcasts can platform and amplify opinions to people who don't go on social media, for example, and are right to do so. These podcasters show up on traditional media outlets like Sky Sports, NBC, whoever. They get interviewed by the BBC, or they have regular columns for news outlets like that. They're interviewed by Spurs journalists to give their opinion on the club. So there is a real feedback loop between podcasters, fans, and not necessarily the club itself, but that kind of ecosystem. And lastly, you might be asking yourself, can I start my own Spurs podcast? Well, yes. You just need to grab a decent mic, maybe a few friends. I don't, because I don't have any friends. Some recording software like Audacity, or you can use an online recording platform like Zencaster. You can even pay for them to edit. You basically use AI to edit your podcast themselves. Then you just need to sign up to something like Spotify for Creators to distribute your podcast, and you're off to the races. It's overwhelming, but it's not impossible. I started this show as a result of a bit of a joke. And some would say it stayed a bit of a joke. But you can do it. If there is a gap out there that you don't see as being filled, go out and fill it. We're seeing a lot more niche podcasts coming out, and it's terrific. And I want to see it keep going. With that, I hope that this has been really helpful to you. Please, follow me on social media. I'm on Blue Sky at poddenhampodspur.bsky.social. You can email me, poddenhampodspur@gmail.com. Please like, comment, share this show. I've been going for 3 seasons now. I really enjoy it. And this was something that I was quite passionate about putting together this episode. And I'm quite proud of the way I've weaved it into something which I hope is a helpful jumping off point for folks. And yeah, comment, email, whatever. Love you. Love Spurs fans. Up the Spurs, COYS, etc.
Why are there so many podcasts about Tottenham? Do I want to know why? They might contain insight, but mostly delusions. If I hear one more, I might die. They don't like Levy, and they don't like Enoch. They pine for Moo and Conte. Someday we'll like 'em, old Tottenham Hotspur, the podcast clout chasers and